Two artificial intelligence programs from tech giants have beaten humans at a reading comprehension test. AI programs built by China-based Alibaba and US-based Microsoft last week scored higher than humans on Stanford's question-answering dataset. The reading comprehension test was created by Stanford University artificial intelligence experts to determine if AI programs can process large amounts of information to answer questions. On January 11th, Alibaba's model scored 82.44, beating the human score to become the first AI program to do so. Chief scientist for natural language processing at Alibaba called the accomplishment, quote, a great honor, and said objective questions can now be answered at a high accuracy by machines. Microsoft program did score higher on the test with an 82.65, but the results were finalized a day after Alibaba's. For United News International, I'm Rachel Latham.
Each year, the World Economic Forum compiles a list of the most pressing threats to humanity. And this year, as with previous years, it predicts some of the biggest challenges will be climate-related. Experts agree that failure to slow climate change, stronger natural disasters, and more extreme weather events will pose some of the greatest risks to global society in 2018. Last year is a good example of what could be in store. 2017 brought record heat and unprecedented financial tolls from natural disasters. The report ranked climate threats higher than others, such as terrorism or infectious disease, partly because climate issues can lead to even more problems. Soaring temperatures can deplete food stocks or force populations to migrate. Severe storms can ruin infrastructure, as Hurricane Maria did across Puerto Rico. The forum repeated its encouragement from last year, and from other international groups like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The best counter to climate threats that affect everyone is cooperation. World and business leaders will discuss their path forward at the forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, starting January 23rd. Even President Trump is expected to attend, the first U.S. president to do so in 18 years.
Is hitting so hard right now, record-breaking cold and snow across the south. You don't usually see scenes like that in North Carolina. You don't. In January.
It's pretty, but it can be dangerous out there. Take a look at this photo from racing legend Dale Earnhardt Jr. He was helping people who drove off the road in North Carolina, then says minutes later he actually crashed into a tree.
Oh, but thankfully he's okay.
Yeah, and if somebody like that who can control the car the way he can crash, it can happen to anybody.
That's a good point, Michael. There's what the roads look like in North Carolina, what he was dealing with. The snow, the ice, those cold temperatures could lead to yet more trouble. Ginger, it's getting dangerous out there.
Oh, is it ever? And just uncomfortable. Baton Rouge, Louisiana dropped to 14. That is the coldest in 29 years. You're looking at a frozen fountain in New Orleans. And check this out, guys. Destin, Florida, that's the Gulf of Mexico with sea smoke coming off. That's how cold it was. The Gulf of Mexico was steaming. Now this morning, Tampa has dropped sub-freezing for the first time in 7 years. So it does not happen every single winter. Certainly doesn't always feel like 0 in Atlanta or Greensboro, North Carolina at 1. The wind chill is 1 where you are, Marcus Moore, and we are so grateful you're out there for us this morning.
Good to be here, Ginger. Good morning to you. You know, the effects of this winter storm are expected to impact travel again today here in this part of the country. And look at this. This storm dumped several inches of snow here in Greensboro, North Carolina. Look how it's all around us here. And look, it has piled up high on these bushes. Just an incredible sight to see this morning. And it's also packed along the roadways here. And the Highway Patrol here in North Carolina says they responded to nearly 1,600 crashes on Wednesday. But this winter storm caused chaos across several states. This morning, heavy snow and thick ice to blame for hundreds of accidents across the Midwest to the Southeast. In Ohio, a truck flipping and plunging into an icy pond. Firefighters rushing to pull the driver from the water.
They had to actually slide down the bank into the edge of the water and force open the door.
And in Georgia, watch closely as this car slides across the highway during a live report from our Atlanta affiliate. Police say treacherous conditions are responsible for at least 10 deaths, including a Louisiana fire chief and an infant who was riding in a car when it slid off a bridge.
If we can use this as a lesson, a reminder to stay out of the weather.
From Louisiana to Tennessee to Texas, homes in the dark and in the cold. Officials saying excess draw from heaters proving too much for power grids. The temperatures plunging so low, fountains turned to ice sculptures and streets were completely frozen over. A Texas police officer losing his footing not once, but twice during a traffic stop. And these 4 pickup trucks had to tow a semi up an icy hill. Even retired NASCAR driver Dale Earnhardt Jr. couldn't escape these winter woes, tweeting that he crashed after helping others who were stranded. And officials expect there to be some melting today here in this part of the country as the temperatures are expected to rise above freezing, but only for a short time, Robin, because those temperatures will then dip right back below freezing again tonight. So the threat of a lot of this snow melting and turning into ice is still a real concern today.
Refreezing. Okay, Marcus, thanks.
A deadly storm has killed at least 4 people in northern Europe. Storm Frederic ripped through the Netherlands and Germany on January 18th, with winds of up to 85 miles per hour. According to authorities, the deaths were caused by falling trees and debris. The storm caused havoc, uprooting trees, tearing off roofs and bringing transportation to a halt. Hundreds of thousands of homes were also left without power. This footage from the Netherlands shows people being swept off their feet by the powerful winds. Industrial signs being ripped down, and a truck overturning on a major highway. This is the second major storm Europe has felt the wrath of this month. Storm Eleanor killed at least 3 people in early January, with winds of up to 100 miles per hour. The latest storm is expected to hit Poland by tonight. For United News International, I'm Rachel Lynn.
At least 15 deaths are being blamed on winter weather that has paralyzed much of the southern United States. Some of those deaths have been linked to car crashes on icy or snow-covered roads in states like Georgia and Louisiana. Meanwhile, several people in Texas reportedly froze to death. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper said Thursday, January 18th, that his entire state woke up to a blanket of snow.
The snow is beautiful, but the roads are treacherous. Do not drive unless you absolutely have to.
North Carolina Highway Patrol reports over 2,000 traffic accidents since the snow started falling. While the winter storm has since moved on, Cooper says his state will continue to feel its impact for several days. Meanwhile, Georgia Governor Nathan Deal closed state offices on Thursday. Hundreds of flights at the world's busiest airport, Atlanta, have also been canceled. For United News International, I'm Cambry Caldwell. An earthquake was felt across parts of southeast Michigan, but the Earth wasn't to blame. The United States Geological Survey said a meteor entered Earth's atmosphere near New Haven Tuesday night, January 16th, causing a magnitude 2.0 earthquake. Dashcam and security videos show the space rock streaking across the sky, turning night to day for a few brief moments. NASA describes meteors as pieces of interplanetary material that fall through the atmosphere, where friction makes them melt and leave trails of bright light. When they explode, as this one did, chunks might reach the ground, at which point they're called meteorites. Bill Cook with NASA's Meteoroid Environment Office told the Washington Post the fireball over Michigan was from a small asteroid traveling at about 28,000 miles per hour. Those who saw it were lucky. Cook says a meteor that bright is rare in Michigan. For United News International, I'm Camberry Caldwell.
A perfect cone is how many here describe Mount Mayon. Thousands travel to the Luzon region to see the volcano up close. But for the people of Albay, the volcano is more than just a tourist attraction. It is also a source of anxiety. It's been spewing ash and lava for the past week, prompting the mass evacuation of thousands of villagers, such as the family of Romel and Divine Miranda. They're now staying in this evacuation center. Having grown up in a village on the slope of the volcano, they've lost count of how many times they've fled danger. They now consider themselves professional evacuees.
It never gets easy. We leave our livelihood behind, we sleep here, it's uncomfortable, but we know we have to obey. The authorities will forcefully evacuate us anyway.
Just like many places across the country, the province of Albay often bears the brunt of natural disasters. It's facing the Pacific Ocean, so it's prone to typhoons and erupting volcanoes because it lies along the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire. But the province is considered the most prepared when it comes to emergency response.
We always aim for zero casualty. And like what you said, during typhoons we can prepare for it. But for the Mayon, when it erupts, we never know. Looking at the present situation, we still have always to innovate because it's not always the same.
Thousands of Filipinos live below Mount Mayon and depend on agriculture for their livelihood. This village is empty and people are making sure it stays that way until the danger passes.
We strive for zero casualties, even if we have to forcibly extricate people from here. Some of them insist on coming back to look after their crops and their livestock. We worry about that stockpile of ash and lava up there.
This is as far as we can go, just right at the 6-kilometer danger zone. Local officials tell us they have not seen the volcano this restive. The smoke coming out of the bottom part of the volcano is lava that just flowed moments ago.
No one died in the last major eruption of Mount Mayon 4 years ago. That does little to appease people here. They doubt whether the preparations will be enough to withstand nature's unbridled fury. Jamela Alendogan, Al Jazeera, Albay Province, Eastern Philippines.
Arson attacks have hit Catholic churches in Chile as the head of the Roman Catholic Church is visiting the country as part of his first leg of his Latin American tour. Chilean police say that the attacks were carried out to cause public disorder during Pope Francis's visit. No group has taken responsibility and no arrests have been made so far. It is also not known exactly how many churches have been attacked. The top Vatican authority arrived in Chile late on Monday. The visit has been marred by violence and public protests against the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals. Dozens of people have been arrested during violent clashes with the police.
Now, the very latest on the nationwide flu epidemic. An entire school district in Texas closing for a week because of an outbreak, and the CDC holding that urgent meeting. ABC's Adrian Bankert has the latest.
This morning, a Connecticut family mourns their 10-year-old son.
Nico was a very lively, vibrant, spirited kid.
Nico Malozzi was looking forward to his youth hockey tournament in Buffalo. He suffered flu-like symptoms before he stepped on the ice, so his mom took him to a local hospital where he tested positive for the flu. He received fluids, was told to rest, and discharged back into the family's care. The family decided to head back to Connecticut, but on the drive home, Malozzi's condition deteriorated. He was rushed to a different hospital and later died from what health officials believe is the flu, complicated by pneumonia and sepsis, where his body was shutting down. His 12-year-old brother now also hospitalized with the same strain.
Usually we see influenza maybe starting in one part of the country and then moving across the country. But right now, influenza is everywhere.
In California, health officials say 42 people under the age of 65 have died from flu-related complications. 40-year-old marathon runner and mother of 3, Katie Oxley Thomas, died just 15 hours after being admitted to an ER in San Jose with flu symptoms. Hospitals overwhelmed without enough room, some setting up ER tents in parking lots to triage the flood of patients.
This seems to be the worst flu season we've had here in at least 10 to 15 years. We're seeing a lot more patients for flu, and the patients we're seeing are a lot sicker than usual.
And the situation is so dire, the CDC postponed a briefing scheduled for nuclear detonation to instead give an update on the response to the severe influenza outbreak. As far as Nico and his family, I mean, unimaginable. This active little boy gets sick on Thursday, died by the end of the weekend.
So heartbreaking for that.
نحن هنا مدنيين مواطنين لا يهمنا شيء ولا نتدخل بالحرب ولا نحمل السلاح ولا كل الذي تم استهدافهم في هذه المنطقة هم أبرياء. حتى الآن لم يقوموا بتوضيح أسباب الاستهداف.
أثرت على البنت، يعني سبب لها إغماء على طول وتأثرت، بدأت تورم وذا من سبب الضربة. خرجتها على اساس انه هناك الدكاتره ما فيش دكاتره ولا شيء، يقول لك احنا معتذر ما نقدرش نعمل له اي حاجه الحاله.
This is how Yemen's internally displaced people live. Shanty roadside shelters which don't even protect them from the weather, let alone the greater dangers.
We were displaced by war. People gave us some mattresses and blankets. We need food. We're on the street. It's very cold here. Charitable people feel pity for us. They gave us some rice and some beans. We're in desperate need of clothes and blankets. We left all our belongings behind us. We have fled having nothing more than our clothes.
More than 3 million people have been displaced since the Saudi-led coalition began bombing the Houthi rebels in 2015. And almost 150,000 of them have settled in the coastal province of Hodeidah. It's largely considered a proxy war between regional powers, Saudi Arabia and Iran, triggering what's being called one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world.
The Saudis bombed us. We headed to different places, including Khamis and Shafar. We finally settled in this area. We are pleased to feel secured here. We need clothes for our children and women. It seems nothing to be given. As you see, we are displaced on this platform.
And there's a chance they may be displaced yet again as Saudi forces and its allies advance on the port town. The UN warns an offensive on the Hodeidah port would displace more than 400,000 people.
We fled from our homes after the non-stop rocket attacks which targeted our area. My father, my grandfather, and my mother came with me. Heavy attacks were conducted on our area. We were wandering, not knowing where to go. Our children were with us. God guided us a way to escape.
The country is now on the brink of famine, and its infrastructure lies in ruins. People are impoverished and threatened by diseases including cholera. And with the easing of the blockade due to expire, millions of Yemeni lives hang in the balance. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TRT World. Residential homes under attack by Russian and regime jets. Here in eastern Ghouta and Damascus, nearly 400,000 people are trapped. Like other medical facilities here, this clinic is a potential target for the regime.
The regime launched its latest campaign of systematic bombing on residential areas, centres and hospitals in eastern Ghouta. People of all ages are killed every day by these attacks. Medical conditions in eastern Ghouta are extremely bad.
Dr. Sakar doesn't have all he needs to help people. He tells us that medical instruments need to be reused and supplies rationed.
UN convoys, which were given access to Ghouta, did not solve the medical problems. They only tried to solve the malnutrition conditions among babies. Those UN convoys entered Ghouta to silence the media campaigns. Those UN convoys did not have any drip sacks, surgery equipment, or tranquilizers. If they were allowed in, they would be limited in number.
The siege has led to a major humanitarian crisis. For the people here, it seems that the international community has failed them. Despite a de-escalation deal agreed last year between Russia, Iran, and Turkey, not many supplies are left on the shelves in pharmacies, and no more are coming. For many people here, the politics of this war are of little consequence. Their needs are immediate. This man suffers diabetes.
I can't find any injection to treat my condition here. We don't have any kind of medicine. It seemed that the regime seized the medicine brought to us. They brought it to Syria in convoys to show the world that they were helping us. Then the regime took it from the depots.
His son was injured by shrapnel while fetching food for his family. He blames Russia for what's happening.
What more does Russia want? Does it want the whole of Syria? Even if we were all killed, we won't let Russia occupy any part of Syria.
People here have seen attempts to get them essential supplies or evacuate them fail. And facing intensifying bomb attacks, it seems their challenge now is to find the strength to survive. Rahul Radhakrishnan, TRT World.
The remains of at least 33 bodies have been discovered in mass graves in the Mexican state of Nayarit. Mexican authorities announced January 17th that human remains had been found in 3 pits in Xalisco Township. Xalisco is home to a black tar heroin trafficking ring, and police say they believe drug violence is responsible for the deaths. Nayarit has been hit hard by Mexican cartel violence. AFP news agency says 117 were recorded missing in Nayarit last year. However, violence has reportedly surged in the state since last March when former Nayarit Attorney General Edgar Vitaya was arrested in the U.S. on drug smuggling charges. Petronila Diaz, the current Attorney General for the state of Nayarit, said, quote, "That's when the mess we're seeing started." According to the Associated Press, Diaz is not ruling out the possibility that some of the victims were dismembered. For United News International, I'm Mila Uni.
At least 52 Uzbeks have been killed in Kazakhstan by a fire which engulfed the bus they were travelling in. The route is often used by immigrant Uzbek labourers travelling through Kazakhstan. A Kazakh official said the bus was overloaded with passengers. Only 5 people managed to escape the blaze, the cause of which is still unknown. It's not the first time such an accident has happened. Last year, more than 50 Uzbeks died when their bus was hit by a train.
On January 17, the Syrian Arab Army SAA and its allied pro-government factions liberated the village of Batha and attacked positions of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, in Hulwiya, Khayaniya, and Andan Shaikh in southern Aleppo. On the same day, government forces repelled an attack by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS in areas of Rubaiyat and Quraiba in eastern Idlib. Reports spread by pro-opposition sources that ISIS captured a large area from the SAA and even Sinjar are untrue. Fighting between the government forces and ISIS took place in the area of Duwaya, where ISIS captured some positions from Liwa al-Quds. On January 18, the clashes continued between the SAA and ISIS in the area, while HTS was deployed reinforcements and conducted several fresh attacks on government positions southwest of Abu al-Duhur. Turkey continued its bombing campaign against positions of Kurdish militias in the area of Afrin and deployed additional armored vehicles across the border with the area. Pro-Turkish sources speculate that the operation there will be launched within a few days. However, much depends on the behind-the-scenes negotiations among the key powers involved in the conflict that is now ongoing, according to the experts. The US will keep an indefinite military presence in Syria in order to remove President Bashar al-Assad from power, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson revealed in a speech at Stanford University on January 17. Assad's regime is corrupt, and his methods of governance and economic development have increasingly excluded certain ethnic and religious groups, the officials said. Such operations could not persist forever. A total withdrawal of American personnel at this time would restore Assad and continue his brutal treatment of his own people, he continued. Tillerson added that free and transparent elections will result in a permanent departure of Assad and his family from power. No doubt the US believes that any election that do not lead to the Assad departure are not free and transparent. Currently, the US has at least 2,000 troops deployed in Syria according to official reports. The real number of the US military personnel and contractors deployed on the ground remains unclear.
During his 6-day visit to India, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he had been informed by New Delhi that it had decided to put a major anti-tank missile deal back on track. India formally cancelled the deal for Spike missiles with Israel's Rafale systems just a week before Netanyahu's trip. Reviving the $500 million deal was one of the objectives of Netanyahu's visit.
Following the talks I had with my friend Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Indian government has informed us that it is putting the Spike deal back on track. This is very important, and there will be many more deals.
Modi's decision to revive the Spike deal came after the Indian Army made it clear that it cannot wait an estimated 4 years for the Indian Defence Research and Development Organization, known as the DRDO, to develop the guided anti-tank missile. It warned that any delay would leave it completely vulnerable. There are mounting concerns in India given the military capabilities and missile firepower of its nuclear-armed rival, Pakistan.
When you talk about the operational edge, any army chief, would like to ensure that his ordnance, whether it is for the tank, the artillery or the infantry, is all of the appropriate level. So there have been cases where the DRDO promises and it delivers sometimes in a delayed manner, and the final product does not meet the user requirement. So that is where the government is then forced to import at short notice.
New Delhi has so far not commented on the statement by the Israeli premier. There were no additional details on how the deal will be consummated, but the Israeli media said the original $500 million value would be cut in half. It is also unclear whether the deal would also include a transfer of technology to India. Analysts say PM Modi is under pressure to keep everyone happy. How he is going to balance that and explain the flip-flops in his decisions to his critics remains to be seen. Sanjay Sethi, Press TV, New Delhi.
India's defense ministry says the country has tested its longest-range intercontinental ballistic missile. The ministry says the missile, which has a range of 5,000 kilometers, was tested from an island in India's eastern coast in the Bay of Bengal. It described the launch as a major boost to the defenses of India. India has been conducting missile tests, citing fears from Pakistan and China. New Delhi and Islamabad have been engaged in an arms race for decades. A long-running dispute between India and China over the Himalayan border has also flared in recent years.
And now Russia's foreign minister has voiced strong concern over the possible collapse of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, saying it will send an alarming message to the world. Sergei Lavrov made the remarks at the UN National Security Council. He said the failure of the accord as a result of one of the parties' non-compliance would deal a severe blow to future international negotiations and deals. Just last week, U.S. President Donald Trump demanded American lawmakers and European signatories fix what he described as disastrous flaws in the deal. Russian top diplomat dismissed Trump's concerns as politically motivated. Lavrov says that Washington's agenda should not lead to the collapse of, quote, a genuine achievement of international diplomacy.
Turkey has asked Russia's permission to begin an air campaign in Syria's Afrin region. In response, Syria says it is prepared to shoot down any planes which enter its airspace. Amid rising tensions, Turkey has sent reinforcements to its border with Afrin. The region is controlled by Syrian Kurds who have strong support from the US military. But Turkey is Washington's main Muslim ally within NATO. The Turkish foreign minister said Turkey needs to proceed cautiously.
We will intervene in Afrin. We will also take steps in the east of the Euphrates, as well as Manbij, against threats towards us. We would not want an ally like the United States against us in this situation. We're meeting with Russians and Iranians on the usage of airspace in the Afrin operation.
Military reinforcements are heading to the border.
Now we begin with the U.S. State Department having called on Turkey not to take any military action in Syria's northwestern region of Afrin. Heather Nauert urged Ankara to remain focused on fighting Daesh terrorists in the region only. Comments come after Ankara said the Turkish forces will intervene in Afrin to counter the Kurdish YPG forces there. Turkey considers the Kurdish group a terror organization and the Syrian branch of the outlaw group, the PKK. Syria has warned Turkey that any combat operation inside the war-torn country would be considered an act of aggression by the Turkish army. Russia has reacted angrily to the passage of a new bill by the Ukrainian parliament, which calls for the reintegration of the Ukraine's east. Russian Foreign Ministry said it considers the legislation a declaration of war now. The bill was passed by parliament in Kiev on Thursday that describes the eastern region as, quote, territory under Russian occupation, and the bill describes Russia as an aggressor state. Also stipulates Donetsk and Lugansk regions must be taken back even by military force if necessary. President Petro Poroshenko has welcomed the law, saying it will help return eastern Ukraine by political and diplomatic means. Relations between Moscow and Kiev soured following the toppling of former President Viktor Yanukovych back in 2014. This promoted pro-Russia fighters to take over Ukraine's east.
Sweden is to send an updated version of a Cold War-era tips and guide booklet to almost 5 million households in the country. The first edition was published in 1943 with instructions on how to act if Sweden went to war, along with advice on how to survive a nuclear strike. Now the new edition will reflect modern threats such as cyber and terror attacks, along with climate change. We talked to the author of the new version, Christina Andersson, who believes the government hopes to increase the alertness to war and crises.
The Swedish government has decided that the knowledge among the Swedish citizens in how to prepare for a crisis, but also for the threat of war, need to increase. People find that the security in the world as a whole, but also in Europe and in Sweden, has worsened. We live in a quite unsafe world. The image of threat is so complex, and you can read about it almost every day in media. So it's like it's surrounding you all the time, so to speak.
Despite some of the stated issues, the Swedish government is placing Russia at the center of current security concerns.
The security policy situation in our part of the world has deteriorated. There are more and more reports of Russian disinformation and impact operations. An armed attack against Sweden cannot be ruled out, nor can we exclude military force or such a threat being used against us.
We got reaction from independent journalist Martin Summers.
All over the world, we are being fed a diet of fear about foreign countries, immigration, terrorism, and this kind of comments being made in Sweden are part of that general atmosphere of fear. There are powerful forces in the West that want to push Sweden into an anti-Russian stance. And there's powerful forces within Sweden who agree with that on the more conservative side of politics there. And this is all part of that ongoing debate and dialogue within Sweden and within Europe in general.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says Russia isn't implementing all international sanctions against North Korea. According to Reuters, Tillerson told reporters Wednesday that the sanctions Russia doesn't enforce primarily concern fuel. But a Russian diplomat told Russian news agency TASS that Tillerson's accusations were absolutely unfounded, adding Russia is fulfilling its obligations under the corresponding UN Security Council resolutions in full. The United Nations decided to impose a new round of sanctions against North Korea late last year, not long after the country tested a ballistic missile it claimed could hit the U.S. mainland. As Newsy previously reported, the new sanctions were meant to deal a serious blow to the North's economy, including its oil imports.
The U.S. is planning to develop 2 new nuclear weapons, including a low-yield warhead, in response to Russia and China's growing military capabilities. According to a January 15th Wall Street Journal report, the Pentagon has proposed a new low-yield warhead that could be used in conjunction with the Trident missile deployed on Ohio-class U.S. Navy submarines. The other weapon is a nuclear-tipped cruise missile, which is a revival of a system that had been dropped from the arsenal in 2010. The recommendations for the new weapons came after a comprehensive Pentagon review on the U.S. military's nuclear capabilities, which was commissioned last year by President Trump. It also came in response to growing military threats from Russia and China, which the Pentagon says are increasingly embracing nuclear weapons in their strategies. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin
This
Mango.
is a breaking news alert.
Top story right now, President Trump making a major military move in the Pacific that just put Little Kim on notice. Benjamin Arif for the Conservative Tribune reports the situation in North Korea. Well, it has the world on high alert, and now the U.S. military is ramping up its diligence in the region, as Hawaii is recovering from a false nuclear attack scare in Japan, dealing with similar jitters of their own, with their own announcement of a false alarm. President Trump has now ordered 6 bombers and hundreds of Air Force personnel to the Pacific, supplementing stealth bombers that have already been moved into the area. They state here, this is according to the Air Force, who made the announcement. B-52 is returning to the Pacific for routine, continuous bomber presence mission. They state here that 6 U.S. Air Force B-52H Stratofortress bombers and approximately 300 airmen from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana are deploying to Anderson Air Force Base in Guam in support of U.S. Pacific Command's continuous bomber presence mission. They write here, the small island of Guam is proving to be quite the center of activity for the Air Force in recent weeks. As you know, Kim Jong-un has also stated that Guam is clearly in his crosshairs. He has threatened Guam repeatedly. They state here that the base in Guam currently is already home to B-1B Lancers, supersonic bombers, and also carrying the largest conventional munitions payload of any Air Force bomber, according to the Daily Caller. They say it here, the U.S. sent 3 B-2 Spirit nuclear-capable stealth bombers and 200 airmen to Guam earlier in January to provide support for the U.S. Pacific Command's bomber assurance and deterrence mission. That's according to the Caller. They say it here, Theodore Roosevelt, he famously advised, speak softly and carry a big stick. President Trump, well, he may not be the world's softest speaker, but he definitely does seem to have the big stick part down. Hopefully the despot in Pyongyang is starting to get the message.
The United States has no road left for putting off reaching an agreement with North Korea to end its development and retention of nuclear weapons. This is according to White House Chief of Staff John Kelly in an interview with Fox News. He said the U.S. has to deal with Kim Jong-un as he cannot have nuclear weapons that can reach the U.S. mainland. But Kelly stressed the United States keeps channels open with North Korea, adding he prefers not to comment further on it. Kelly also refused to say whether President Trump had spoken directly to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
For more on this, we turn to Philip Giraldi. He is a former CIA officer and counterterrorism specialist. Philip, great to have you with us tonight. First of all, Sarah Sanders, you heard what she had to say. Is this the right approach for the White House at this point?
Well, I don't think so. I think the White House has been pursuing a bad approach for quite some time now. There have been kind of a mixture of threats and intimidation of various kinds. The other side of the coin in terms of what's happening right now is there's, of course, a large military buildup by the United States off the coast. So this, to me, is dangerous in and of itself. It increases the possibility that there will be some kind of incident that unfortunately could escalate.
How do you interpret what's happening between North and South Korea right now? Is it a charm offensive, or are these sanctions working to the point where the North Koreans have to make a move?
Well, my feeling is that this is probably not necessarily the initiative of the North Koreans. I think the South Koreans, of course, are quite nervous of what might be developing here, and it might well have been that the South Koreans were the ones that really pushed this, because the South Koreans would suffer as much, or if not more, if there were to be a situation escalating into conflict. So I think it's a positive sign. I think that also the sign that the Russians and Chinese are being accused of betraying the sanctions regime is maybe a good thing too, because that means that the Chinese and Russians will have some leverage over further discussions between the two sides.
Well, where's the UN Security Council on that? The United States is saying that there's some cheating going on. That's basically what they're saying, Rex Tillerson. So why isn't the United Nations Security Council doing that? They took a vote on it. The UN knows what this is all about. Why are they silent at this hour?
Well, I would suspect that the United States may not have any evidence that that's what's going on. If they had evidence, I'm sure we'd see Nikki Haley in the UN presenting it in her school marmish fashion, and saying that essentially this is what's going on. But we haven't seen that, have we? So I suspect this is one of these kind of, well, maybe they're doing that, maybe they're not, innuendos.
President Putin last week said that he thought that North Korea has won in this most recent crisis with the United States. One, in terms of getting what they want, to have the upper hand. You believe that? Is he correct?
Well, it's not completely correct, because the situation is more complicated than that. But I think that he has a point in that the United States has, by pursuing a belligerent position from the beginning, boxed itself into a corner where it really doesn't have very many options. And that's why Tillerson, for example, today, again repeating the military option as a possibility. There is no military option. A military option would be totally destructive of both countries and would quite likely start a nuclear exchange and could well be something like a precursor to World War III.
Okay. Mr. Giraldi, great to have you with us tonight. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Awesome. A special coin was given to this special boy by a hero who died in the line of duty.
Remember that coin he promised to bring you?
Yeah.
But he had to go to California and never got to bring it to you.
Mason, an 11-year-old from Washington, became friends with Garrett Hayes, a firefighter from Missouri. Happy birthday to you. Garrett was moved after learning about Mason's birthday dinner celebrated with firefighters.
How much they just made his day when I felt there was nothing else I could do.
After reaching out, the two became close, even though they never met. Then Garrett was sent to California to battle the wildfires. This was the text he sent Mason's mom. "I'm headed to the fire line, Kay. Pray for us. This one is bad." Sadly, he never made it back. But the bond between Garrett and Mason lives on. Garrett's wife mailed Mason the coin as well as the American flag that draped his coffin during his memorial service.
That was the flag that was on his casket that they handed Bobby, his wife. And she knew that that Garrett would want you to have it, so she mailed it to you. Can you believe that?
No.
Isn't that an honor?
A hero's honor now in the hands of a good friend.